Hello everyone! Today's drawing is inspired by Iron Fist or Danny Rand from Ultimate Spider-Man. Without giving away too many spoilers, this Iron Fist is an alternative Iron Fist from Season 4's Return to Spider-Verse, in which Danny's actually a vampire. I took a lot of concepts from that episode and put that into here. So getting started with the drawing itself, I sketched out my work on Bristol board. You can actually see my concept work on the upper corner of my desk. I kept it there in case I needed it for reference, which as it turns out I actually did, so it was a good thing. After I sketched it out, I inked it using dip pens. Since it was my first time using dip pens, I was quite nervous. I found that my lines were quite thick right after I had dipped it into the inkwell. So I would focus on thick lines with a freshly dipped pen, working towards thin lines as my pen ran out. This process was very time consuming, but I liked the result. For some of the darker details, such as the areas around Iron Fist's eyes on his mask and the dragon on his chest, I used a round brush dipped in ink. I later decided to darken them, but to do that I used my black Copic, and that came later. Especially since this was my first time using dip pens in a project like this, I decided to run the ink, which I just bought, through its paces on a separate piece of paper. The bottle said that it was waterproof, so I put 2 test marks out and let them completely dry, and once completely dry, the ink did prove to be waterproof. However, I was concerned that it wouldn't be Copic proof, so I did a couple test marks using Copics. It did not prove to be very Copic proof. It smudged a fair bit, which wasn't a bad thing. It just meant that I had to be very, very careful as I was going through, and I still used it anyways. So as you can see, as I started inking the picture, I actually tried very hard to kind of go in and be very precise around the lines, put it as close to the line as possible without fully touching it, and if I would touch it, I would clean the nib off on a separate piece of paper before going back and working with that ink again. That way it prevented too many smudges, and I think it turned out very well. So as I was working through this, I also had to keep an eye on where the light sources were going to be from. The light source was going to be primarily from behind him, but I didn't want him to be too backlit because I thought it would kind of wash out the character. So I made sure that he had shadows in the right places so that you could tell that there was a lamp behind him, but kind of enough light on his face that may have been coming from the dawn and from the city, and those are going to be added in later. Usually when I'm working on a big piece like this, my concept is usually the character first and then the background comes later. It's unfortunately just the way that my brain works. I have to be able to know what the character looks like before I can know what the background looks like. For this one, I actually knew exactly what I wanted to do with everything before I even put pen to paper. So the concept was a lot more defined and finished in some ways. So I knew that I wanted a lot of light in this piece. So I put the lamp behind Danny, or Iron Fist, and then I put a whole bunch of street lamps in the city below to kind of make a glowing effect. This also would make it seem really cool once I put the fog effect in, which I was also hoping to be able to accomplish. Because I really wanted the color and the light to pop, I really blended in a lot of dark colors. So I pulled out all of my dark scales. So I used my 2 Copic grays, C1 and C3, and then I used my Prismacolor gray. I had bought a whole bunch of Prismacolor grays for a project I was doing, and I'm still trying to get through them. I think I finally used the last one on this drawing here. And then I used plum because I really love that color, the Copic color. I think it's eggplant. It's eggplant. And then I used my blues, a Prussian blue. Every time I laid down a new color, I blended it with a color that was already laid down, and that used a lot of my marker. I mean, I am completely out of all my grays right now. And then that means that it will be almost seamless, and it will really make that lamp look like it's shining, and the shadows are just falling from that lamp. So the most difficult part of this drawing for me was actually the cityscape, so behind the stone wall. Since the city and the show was based off of kind of Victorian style New York, I went for that feel. I put down a layer of gray throughout the city. I used two colors of gray. I used my darker and my lighter. The lighter kind of gave a fog effect, while the darker showed the shadows. And then after that, I went over it with my colored pencils so that I could actually put color into it. So I implied the colors of the buildings and that there was a difference in texture and colors. And then I had also put in copper roofing for certain design elements within the city itself. So I went through and made sure that those looked nice and shiny. This took a lot of patience to get this the cityscape to look the way I wanted it to, but it was completely worth it in the end. To finish up, I added highlights and shadows by using my gel pen and colored pencils. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!